Welcome to A Dram of Outlander. This is Desiree, your podcaster and the writer for adramofOutlander.com. For all things Outlander, from the Dinah Gabaldon book series to the Stars TV series and everything in between. This is podcast episode 127, week 13 of the Drums of Autumn read-along. Hello! We're jumping into chapters 20 and 21 this week. And the summary goes something like this. The small cabin is completed. Visitors come bearing gifts. Claire makes a friend and receives a prophecy. Young Ian is on a hunting trip. Jamie goes to check the traps. Claire tends to the business of home. Jamie doesn't return. Claire tracks him in the snow. Jamie has injured his back. Claire stays with him. They see a band of Mohawk. Young Ian and friends rescue Claire and Jamie. Back home, they are safe and sound. Jamie has a vision. Inside the chapters, Chapter 20, The White Raven, October 1767. This chapter opens with Jamie and young Ian building the cabin together. Jamie is reciting the translated version of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. As a side note, remember to check the post that goes with the podcast for links of things of interest. Once they get to a difficult log placement, Jamie can no longer continue his recitation. Jamie wants young Ian to be educated. Rollo alerts them to a visitor. It's Nacognaweto, a friend of young Ian's with 3 women in tow. They are dressed for visiting and bearing gifts. Jamie declares it's an ambassage and wants Claire in her finest. "Get dressed," he interrupted, shoving the clothes box in my direction. "Put on your gaudiest things, aye? It wouldn't be respectful else." Gaudy was going a bit far in the description of any item of my current wardrobe, but I did my best, hastily tying a yellow linen skirt around my waist and replacing my plain white kerchief with one Jocasta had sent me, embroidered with cherries. I thought that would do. After all, it was obviously the males of the species who were on display here. Jamie, having flung off his breeks and belted his crimson plaid in record time, fastened it with a small bronze brooch, snatched a bottle out from under the bed frame, and was out through the open side of the house before I'd finished tidying my hair. This is going to be a party! The formal greeting ritual is performed by the men. Once it concludes, the second woman acknowledges Claire. "Bonjour, messieurs, madame," she said softly, looking from one to another of us. Her eyes rested on me with frank curiosity, taking in every detail of my appearance. So I felt no compunction in staring at her likewise. Mixed blood, I thought, perhaps French. "Je suis sa femme," she said with the graceful inclination of her head toward Nacognaweto, the words verifying my guess as to her heritage. "Je m'appelle Gabrielle." Je m'appelle Claire," I said with a slightly less graceful gesture at myself. "S'il vous plaît." I waved at the pile of waiting logs, inviting them to sit down, while mentally wondering whether there was enough of the squirrel stew to go around. She's practical sometimes. Gabrielle is Nacognaweto's wife. The elder woman, Nayawenne, is his grandmother. Claire looks her over, noticing the leather pouch hung around her neck. The younger of the 3 women is Berthe, Gabrielle's daughter, not by her husband, it seems. The girl has the look of an American Indian and European. The introductions are complete. The girl opens the bundle she carried. There's a variety of foods. Claire makes an exclamation about the return of Squanto, which nobody, of course, understands. It's about 2 months' worth of food. The bear meat was received well in the village. This is a small gift in return. The women giggle at Claire having heard the full exploits of the bear attack, including Claire hitting Jamie with a fish. The old woman moves closer to Claire. She pats her all over, talking to herself during the proceedings. Her reaction to Claire's hair is pure sweetness. The murmur grew louder and took on a tone of astonishment when she got to my hair. I obligingly took out the pins and shook it down over my shoulders. She pulled out a curl, drew it taut, then let it spring back and laughed like a drain. It would be surprising to see hair that curly compared to what they're used to in very straight hair. Jamie shows Nacognaweto the construction. The women chat. Claire learns Gabrielle is Nacognaweto's second wife and he, her second husband. Her first husband was a Frenchman and died 10 years earlier. They live in a village called Onauka, 2 days northwest from Fraser's Ridge. That is a real settlement of the Tuscarora, and I have put a link to it in the post. Claire and Nayawenne are having a conversation without words. Claire felt it, though the woman said nothing to her. Across the clearing, she sees Jamie offer a gift of brandy to Nacognaweto. It's time to offer gifts. Claire gives an item to two of the women, but has something else in mind for Nayawenne. She gives her 4 large ginseng roots. The old woman hands Claire a small bag from her waist. It's also ginseng roots. This confirms she and Claire speak the same language. It takes a healer to know one. Claire asks about the amulet Nayawenne wears. Grandmère est? She hesitated, looking for the right French word, but I already knew. Pas docteur? Et pas sorcière? Magicien? Elle est... I hesitated too. There really wasn't a suitable word for it in French after all. We say she is a singer, Berthe put it in shyly, in French. We call it shaman, her name. It means it may be, it will happen. What a beautiful name. It may be, it will happen. The woman hands Claire her amulet. It feels heavy and almost alive. Claire hands it back. Nayawenne offers to show Claire plants of use in the area. Claire is impressed by the old woman's spryness. The 2 younger women followed behind, interpreting as needed. The old woman tells Gabrielle something astonishing about Claire. My husband's grandmother says that she had a dream about you on the night of the full moon 2 moons ago. About me? She told us about the dream, that she had seen a woman with... Her lips twitched, then hastily straightened themselves, and she delicately touched the ends of her own long, straight hair. 3 days later, my husband and his sons returned to tell of meeting you and the bear killer in the forest. She who heals said at once that she must see you, and so when we heard that you were here, my husband's grandmother says that when she dreamed of you, it was here. Gabrielle gestured over the pool and looked back at me with great seriousness. She met you here at night. The moon was in the water. You became a white raven. You flew over the water and swallowed the moon. Oh! The white raven flew back and laid an egg in the palm of her hand. The egg split open, and there was a shining stone inside. My husband's grandmother knew this was great magic, that the stone could heal sickness. Nayawenne nodded her head several times, and taking the amulet from her neck, reached into it. On the day after the dream, my husband's grandmother went to dig canea root, and on the way she saw something blue sticking in the clay of the riverbank. It's a sapphire. We call it, she hesitated, looking for the proper French translation, pierre sans peur. Pierre sans peur, a fearless stone? Nayawenne nodded. My father's grandmother says a stone like this, it keeps people from being afraid, and so it makes their spirits strong so they will be healed more easily. Already this stone has healed 2 people of fever and cured a soreness of the eyes that my younger brother had. My husband's grandmother wishes to thank you for this gift. Wow. Nayawenne is something special. My husband's grandmother says that you have medicine now, but you will have more. When your hair is white like hers, that is when you will find your full power. And the last thing that she says you must not be troubled. Sickness is sent from the gods. It won't be your fault. This startles Claire greatly. I wonder what else Nayawenne knows, because she doesn't share anything else after this. So they were building a relationship with the Tuscarora on their own and through young Ian, hunting with the young men in the village. He spends a lot of time going back and forth and is also learning their language. So the fact that this healer woman wanted to meet Claire says something significant. So pin that, remember it, it's going to come back. Chapter 21, Night on a Snowy Mountain. December 1767. It's been a couple of months since the Indians visited Jamie and Claire. The snow arrived at the end of November. Life on the ridge takes on the rhythms of winter. We had no candles, only grease lamps and rush lights, and the light of the fire that burned constantly on the hearth, blackening the roof beams. We therefore rose at first light and lay down after supper in the same rhythm as the creatures of the forest around us. They had few animals to care for, and no sheep to have wool to spin, and no cloth to weave or dye. Yet Myers had brought a small bag of useful tools. Jamie and young Ian had gotten a roof on the cabin before the first snow. Young Ian and Jamie spent time carving wood. He already made a stool. Myers had also brought a bag of women's tools, eye roll, for sewing and mending clothing. Granted, Claire's probably better at that than Jamie is, but he knits better than her. Claire's not a fan of sewing, but Jamie and young Ian's clothes are in constant need of repair. Jamie sits bolt upright in bed when a drip of water hits him in the ear. There's a leak in the roof. Jamie refuses to wait until daylight to fix the shingle. "Don't you go up on the roof in that!" I exclaimed, sitting up abruptly. "That's your good woolen shirt!" He halted by the door, glared briefly at me, then with the rebuking expression of an early Christian martyr, laid down his tools, stripped off his shirt, dropped it on the floor, picked up the tools, and strode majestically out to deal with the leak, buttocks clenched with determined zeal. I rubbed a hand over my sleep-puffed face and moaned softly to myself. That is such a great image right there of Jamie stripping down and walking out into the snow, buck naked. With young Ian's help on the inside, Jamie replaces the split shingle on the outside. And after that, back in bed, Jamie curled his freezing body around me, clasped me to his icy bosom, and fell promptly asleep, full of the righteous satisfaction of a man who has defended hearth and home against all threat. Yes, he's done it. He's fixed the domain. Claire reflects on their meager but successful existence. They have enough food to last until spring if they're careful. They spend time talking, telling stories, and Jamie even carved dishes and a chess set. Young Ian and Rollo spent time going to Anauka and going on hunting trips with the men. Young Ian also learned to speak the Indian language. "Claire is happy," young Ian goes on the trips. "Three's a crowd when you ache for a feather bed, a fire, and a lover without an audience." When alone, Claire and Jamie could continue deepening their relationship and knowledge of each other. When Ian was gone, we would not trouble with rushlights, but would go to bed with the dark and lie curled together in shared warmth, talking late into the night, laughing and telling stories, sharing our pasts, planning our future, and somewhere in the midst of the talking, pausing to enjoy the wordless pleasures of the present. Jamie often asks about Brianna. Claire shares a story about visiting Brianna's school on career day. It was what they called career day. The school teachers invited a lot of people with different jobs to come and explain what they did, so the children would have some idea of what a lawyer does, for instance, or a firefighter. I should think that one would be fairly obvious. Hush. Or a veterinarian, that's a doctor who treats animals, or a dentist, that's a special doctor who deals only with teeth. With teeth? What can you do to a tooth besides pull it? You'd be surprised. Anyway, they'd always ask me to come because it wasn't at all common for a woman to be a doctor then. You think it's common now? He laughed, and I kicked him lightly on the shin. Well, it got more common rather soon after that, but at the time it wasn't. And when I'd got done speaking and asked if there were any questions, an obnoxious little boy piped up and said that his mother said women who worked were no better than prostitutes, and they ought to be home minding their families instead of taking jobs away from men. I should not think his mother can have met many prostitutes. No, I don't imagine. Nor all that many women with jobs either. But when he said that, Brianna stood up and said in a very loud voice, "Well, you'd better be glad my mama's a doctor, because you're going to need one." Then she hit him on the head with her arithmetic book, and when he lost his balance and fell down, she jumped on his stomach and punched him in the mouth. I could feel his chest and stomach quivering against my back. "Oh, bra lassie, did the schoolmaster not toss her for it, though?" "They don't beat children in school." She had to write a letter of apology to the little beast. But then he had to write one to me, and she thought that was a fair exchange. The more embarrassing part was that it turned out his father was a doctor too, one of my colleagues at the hospital. "I wouldn't have supposed you'd taken a job he'd wanted." How'd you guess? Oh, Brianna. That's our Claire, always making friends and influencing people. And Brianna has the fire of the Frasers in her for sure. Interested in Brianna's career path, Jamie asks about her plans. He's surprised to find out children in the future often change their minds many times before settling on a vocation. And he has some questions about some jobs that Claire brings up. What in God's name is a deep-sea diver, let alone a garbage man? I hope we see some of these scenes on film. It's so wonderful, the banter between them. Claire goes over a litany of 20th century occupations, but Jamie's nipple distracts her during the telling. Claire thinks Brianna chose history for the love of Frank, and after he died, she'd stayed in the program. She has no idea she changed her major after she left for the 18th century. Claire still thinks Brianna is a history major. Jamie says she's loyal. He wonders if she sticks with history, if she'll find them in her research. Claire doesn't think so. They'd have to do something worthy of widespread news. Oh, how could that ever happen to the Frasers, right? And Brianna would have to be specifically looking for them. Jamie points out something else about loyalty. "You're a very intelligent woman, Sassenach, but short-sighted forby. Though perhaps it's only modesty." "And what makes you say that?" "The lassie's loyal, you said. She'll have loved her father enough to shape her life to do as he would have wanted even after he's dead. Do you think she loved you less?" I turned my head and let the piled hair fall down over my face. "No," I said at last. "Well then." He took me by the hips and turned to me, rolling slowly on top of me. We didn't speak any more. Then as the melting boundaries of our bodies disappeared, a slow, peaceful knife and sheath together. The last thing Jamie says before they drift to sleep. She'll look. A couple of days later, Jamie takes advantage of the improved weather to hunt. Claire is worried for him going, but they do need meat. Claire tends to the cauldron on the fire. They have an ingenious way of using the boiling water. I took my snow inside and tipped it into the large cauldron, feeling, as I always did, rather like a witch. "Double, double toil and trouble," I muttered, watching the white clumps hiss and fade into the roiling liquid. I had one large cauldron filled with water, which bubbled constantly on the fire. This was not only the basic supply for washing, but the means of cooking everything that could not be grilled, fried, or roasted. Stews and things to be boiled were put in hollow gourds or stoneware jars, sealed and lowered on strings into the bubbling depths, to be hauled out at intervals for checking. By this means, I could cook an entire meal in the one pot and have hot water for washing afterward. Truly ingenious. Are any of you aware of this style of cooking from the 18th century? I did not have the opportunity to look it up before I recorded. Now I want to try it, though, and see how it works. I love the idea. It must be an awfully large cauldron to be able to make enough food for 3 people, at least 2 people. She sits down to read Daniel Rawlings' casebook and men's stockings. I think I would find it scary having Jamie go out alone in inclement weather, even if less inclement than the prior days. As time goes on and Jamie hasn't returned, she openly worries. The daylight is dimming and she's on high alert. She goes about her work but is increasingly concerned. She now takes on a more clinical view of her tasks. The way she gets firewood and plans every step of use until morning. She's frightened now. Bloody man, what have you done? Shot a moose? My voice sounded small in the muffled air, but the thought made me feel better. If he had, in fact, bagged something large near the end of the day, he might well have chosen to camp by the carcass. Butchering a large animal was exhausting, lengthy work, and meat was too hard to come by to leave it to the mercies of predators. The dinner stew is ready to eat, and the cabin has an inviting aroma. Claire is without appetite. It's now dark. She forces herself to eat. She smored the fire and tries to rest. Her mind is reeling. She worries he's injured. She also knows he can live outdoors quite capably, and yet... In Scotland, said my imagination cynically, where the biggest carnivore is a wildcat the size of a house cat, where the biggest human threat was English soldiers. Fiddlesticks, I said and rolled onto my back. He's a grown man, and he's armed to the teeth, and he certainly knows what to do if it's snowing. What would he do, I wondered. Find or make shelter, I supposed. I recalled the crude lean-to he'd built for us when we first camped on the ridge and felt a little reassured. If he hadn't hurt himself, he probably wouldn't freeze to death. She cannot stop thinking of what-ifs out there in the dark. She longed for him. To be alone with Jamie was bliss, adventure, and absorption. To be alone without him was to be alone. That sums it up tidily. He's her world, her everything. It's that kind of sentence or sentences that makes me think that this is ultimately their story as seen through his life or through all his connections. I keep looking for it because that's what Diana Gabaldon says. The books are really Jamie's story. She gets up, dresses, and prepares to go out searching for him. She knew the general direction he'd been planning to go. She hears him in her head reminding her how to track. She finds the snares and follows his footprints from one snare to the next. The 4th snare wasn't empty, so he hadn't gotten that far. She thinks he must be between snare 3 and 4. Claire calls for him. She picks a direction and promptly loses her footing, sliding down a hill. There, she finds him partially covered in leaves, lying on his belly. She throws herself on him. He groans loudly from pain. First, she assesses him for damage and injury. He tells her, back, but she thinks he's been shot. She looks for a wound. Is that you, Sassenach? Yes, it's me. What happened to you? You said you'd been shot in the back. No, I didn't. I couldna, for I haven't been. There's a very cold wind whistling up my backside, Sassenach. Do you think you could maybe cover me? What the hell is the matter with you? I said. He was waking up a bit. He twisted his head to look round at me, moving laboriously. Aye, well, no real matter. It's only that I cannot move much. Why not? Have you twisted your foot, broken your leg? No. I've put my back out of joint. You what? I've done it once before. It doesn't last more than a day or 2. I suppose it didn't occur to you that you wouldn't last more than a day or 2 lying out here on the ground covered with snow? It did. But there didn't seem much I could do about it. He sounds so practical and kind of disaffected about the whole thing, and Claire gets all worked up. He's injured his back. It's out and he cannot move because of the pain. It should take only a couple of days to mend itself. He's lying face down on the frozen ground and it's snowing. Claire can't think of what she can do to remedy the situation given the location Jamie crawled to. She stops trying to figure out how to get him back to the cabin and alarms with a fresh concern. Hypothermia might already be setting in. Jamie still could freeze to death. Claire goes into doctor mode alpha. She makes him stay awake and move whatever body parts he can. She has him moving and in a bad temper. Keep moving, I advised him. I got up with some difficulty, having grown quite stiff from crouching over him so long. Move, I say, I added sharply as he showed symptoms of flagging. Stop and I'll step square on your back. I swear I will. I think Claire might be in a bit of a bad temper, too. He tells her to go cut hemlock branches to cover them. He's warm enough, so she goes off to cut the branches. The task is difficult with her cold hands and the branches being fresh and spongy. Claire completes the job and snuggles in behind him. It's her turn to shiver from relief and fear. As Jamie does, he tries to reassure Claire and tells her what happened. How long have you been out here? I asked finally. On the ground, I mean. He started to shrug, then stopped abruptly, groaning. A good time. It was just past noon when I jumped off a wee crop of rock. It wasn't more than a few feet high, but when I landed on one foot, my back went click. And next I knew, I was on my face in the dirt, feeling as though someone had stabbed me in the spine with a dirk. Huh. Yep. It's so nice to be getting older when that happens. It just reminds you of your age. She finds the area of pain. It runs from his back down his leg. She thinks it's severe muscle spasms. She has none of the things she would normally use to treat it. She offers acupuncture, but he declines. Sassenach, I can stand fine being hurt, cold, and hungry. I will not put up with being stabbed in the back by my own wife. Can you not offer a bit of sympathy and comfort instead? I laughed and slid an arm around him, pressing close against his back. I let my hand slide down and rest in delicate suggestions well below his navel. What sort of comfort do you have in mind? He hastily grasped my hand to prevent further intrusion. Not that. To some people, cooking is love. To Claire, clinical care is love. Well, and sex is love. I dare say. Well, I'll tell you, Sassenach. Once we've got home and I've a warm bed to lie in and hot supper in my belly, that notion might have a good bit of appeal. As it is, the thought of, for Christ's sake, have you not the slightest idea how cold your hands are, woman? I laid my cheek against his back and laughed. I could feel the quiver of his own mirth, though he couldn't laugh aloud without hurting his back. Oh, that cheeky Claire. They lie quietly until Claire asks what time it is. Since it's just past solstice, it's one of the longest nights. It's very late in the middle of the night. He explains to her they can sleep and be okay. The snow is insulative like a blanket. They have a serious and humor-filled moment during the discussion. Well, perhaps we'd better stay awake for a bit then, just in case. I will na wave my arms about any more. There's no room, and if you stick your icy wee paws in my breeks, I swear I'll throttle you bad back or no. All right. What if I tell you a story instead? Highlanders loved stories, and Jamie was no exception. She tells him a Christmas story revolving around a tradition she, Frank, and Brianna had with the Christmas carol. During one Christmas, the three of them were traveling to a relative's home. They skidded off the road, and they were holed up in the car until morning, when they could be rescued. Frank told a Christmas story from memory. Until Brianna had fallen asleep. He and Claire finished the story while holding hands beneath the blankets. Frank had always loved her hands. Claire came to the last words of the story. God bless us, everyone. I ended and lay silent, a small needle of grief, like an ice splinter through my heart. It was quiet inside the shelter and seemed darker. Snow had covered over all the openings. Claire isn't cold-hearted. She loved Frank and still has a place of mourning for him. She also misses Brianna. Jamie invites her to place her hands under a shirt and assures her he won't let her freeze. The difference between Frank and Jamie is Jamie can hear Frank and be okay. He can even be appreciative even when jealousy might rise for the time he did without Claire and Brianna. He understands Claire is made up of her experiences, including Frank. I think Frank wanted Jamie banished and refused to let him into their marriage. Claire doesn't have to apologize for Frank or for her life. She can simply be who she is with Jamie. That is an exceptional kind of love. Jamie never takes away from the fact that Frank had a huge impact on Claire's life. For goodness sake, he sent Claire pregnant back to Frank, knowing he would love and care for them. I mean, that's unconditional love. That's romantic love. That's agape love. That's every kind of love rolled into one for somebody that you would sacrifice so for them. And still be able to hear about it and hear those stories that shaped who she is today. I don't think Frank ever could deal with that. He couldn't accept it. He couldn't live with the reality that Claire had somebody else in her heart. And if he would have been able to accept it, I think their marriage could have been different because she could have talked about it. She could have explained who she became and why. I think Frank really missed an opportunity for that. Claire and Jamie slept until dawn nears. They hear voices. The men are speaking an Indian tongue, but it isn't Tuscarora. Are these men safe or raiders? The situation could be very dangerous. Their hiding place becomes less secure as snow melts and falls away. Jamie grips Claire hard. The Indians are across the grove. They grow closer. Claire's fear rises. There are several armed men in the party. Jamie and Claire are sweating with worry. They are upwind from the men, so their adrenaline-scented sweat is not going to be detected. As the last man comes through the grove, another large chunk of snow falls from their makeshift shelter. The last man is a Jesuit priest. Claire thinks it's safe to call them, as they are Christians. Jamie doesn't believe these Indians are safe. The men pass without incident, but Jamie and Claire receive no help. After the danger passes, Claire inquires about Jamie's back. It's not in good shape, and he has no idea how to get down the mountain. Then the matter of hungry bellies make their needs known. He wants Claire to go to the cabin. There's the small issue of Claire not knowing how to get back. Oh, I love this part. It's so phenomenal. How did you find me? Tracked you, I said with a certain amount of pride. I glanced through the needles of the blowing wilderness outside. I don't suppose I can do it in reverse, though. Oh. He looked mildly impressed. Well, that was very resourceful of you, Sassenach. Dinna worry, though. I can tell you how to go find your way back. Right. And then what? Bring me back a bit of food and a blanket. I should be able to move in a few days. Leave you here? I'll be all right. You'll be eaten by wolves. Oh, I should not think so. They'll be busy with the elk, most likely. What elk? He nodded toward the hemlock grove. Oh, my goodness gracious. It turns out Jamie had shot an elk before hurting his back. He thinks anything dangerous is probably eating the elk, so they're fine. Claire thinks it's crazy to leave him on his own. She insists she'll get supplies and return. She's not leaving him alone. He agrees if she returns with whiskey. Smart man. She snuggles up to him, kissing the hollow of his throat. Ah! Don't do that! Ah! Don't do that! You don't like it? No, I didn't like it. How could I? It makes my skin crawl. Well, I like it. He looked at me in amazement. You do? Oh, yes. I dearly love to have you nibble on my neck. So he decides to try it out. Eee, I said, and shivered uncontrollably. He let go, looking at me in astonishment. I will be damned. You do like it. You've gone all goose flesh and your nipples are hard as spring cherries. Told you. I suppose one of my ancestors was bitten by a vampire or something. Then she goes into an explanation about vampires and their seductive qualities. He finds it completely disgusting. Claire wants him to nibble some more. Jamie changes his mind and would like her in the flesh, cold or not. In the process of getting busy, Claire gets the sense of being watched. She looks out the shelter. He doesn't want her to stop, but now she hears something. At this, I did hear something, a laugh low but distinct, directly above my head. I rolled off in a tangle of cloaks and discarded buckskins, while Jamie cursed and snatched for his pistol. He flung aside the branches with a swoosh, pointing the pistol upward. From the top of the rock above, several heads peered over, all grinning. Ian and 4 companions from Anauka. The Indians murmured and snickered among themselves, seeming to find something immoderately funny. Jamie laid down the pistol, scowling up at his nephew. And what the devil are you doing here, Ian? Why, I was on my way home to keep Christmas with you, Uncle, Ian said, grinning hugely. Jamie eyed his nephew with marked disfavor. Christmas? Bah humbug. Hallelujah, they're rescued by young Ian and some Tuscarora. They come across the dead elk. The sight of its frozen form assures Claire she'd done the right thing going out in the middle of the night to find Jamie. The stark still life before my eyes might well have been entitled Dead Scotsman in Snow rather than Frozen Elk with Arguing Indians. Ugh, no dead Scotsman in snow. The Tuscarora would help Jamie get back to the cabin for a share of the elk meat. After the animal is properly prepared, they set out with Jamie being drugged behind on a travois. There's a link so you can see it, and I'll post a picture in the post. Claire asked young Ian about the other band of Indians who had a priest along. He and the Tuscarora were following them when they found Jamie and Claire. The Indians were Mohawk from the north. The young Mohawk men were looking for wives. See, a woman must be to the proper clan, Ian explained. If she is the wrong clan, they cannot be married. Like MacDonald's and Campbell's, aye? Aye, a bit. But that's why they brought the priest with them. If they found women, they could be married at once and not have to sleep in a cold bed all the way home. Ha. Some of the men were Christian. Not all. Jamie wants to know why young Ian and the others were following them. They may be allies, Auntie, but it does not mean Nacognaweto and his braves trust them. Even the other nations of the Iroquois League are afraid of the Mohawk, Christian or no. I think Nacognaweto is a smart man. They return to the cabin by sunset and are joyously greeted by Clarence the mule. I hope we have a Clarence on the show. He's a very social creature. Everything looks normal. Claire wants to get into the cabin. They invite the Tuscarora men to stay, but they decline. They didn't like to stay in a white person's house, Auntie. They think we smell bad. Oh, really? I said, in pique, thinking of a certain elderly gentleman I had met in Anauka who appeared to have smeared himself with bear grease and then had himself sewn into his clothes for winter. The pot calling the kettle black, if you ask me. Yes, everybody smells bad to somebody else. It's Christmas evening, and after a few drams of whiskey, Claire and Jamie lay in their own bed, listening to young Ian snore. It's good to be home again. It is. I did have the strangest dream sleeping in the cold. You did? What did you dream about? All kinds of things. I dreamt of Brianna now and again. Really? I too had dreamt of Brianna in our icy shelter, something I seldom did. I did wonder, has she a birthmark, Sassenach? And if so, did you tell me of it? She does. I don't think I ever told you about it, though. It isn't visible most of the time, so it's been years since I noticed it myself. It's a... His hand, tightening on my shoulder, stopped me. It's a wee brown mark, shaped like a diamond, just behind her left ear, isn't it? Yes, it is. It was warm and cozy in bed, but a small coolness on the back of my neck made me shiver suddenly. Did you see that in your dream? I kissed her there, he said softly. Woo! So it seems Jamie travels in his dreams, or he has visions. I think he astral projects. See, Claire can travel through the stones, but I think that Jamie can travel through time through astral projection. This is important to note. This kind of phenomenon will come back. And remember way, way, way back in the first book when there was a ghost looking up at Claire in Inverness. Tuck it in your cap or pin it in your mind. I think this section, this chapter, tells us again of the very real dangers Claire and Jamie face settling in the mountains. This chapter is filled with figurative language, rising action, conflict, and resolution. I mean, it was really quite a ride. Diana Gabaldon's use of bantering humor bring Jamie and Claire's relationship off the page into reality. And you can really see a married couple exchanging with each other, talking to each other, being silly or sarcastic or yelling. And they do yell, these two. Claire mostly, I think. She's feisty, that one. So I would love to hear your comments and questions, and you can call the listener line at 719-425-9444 and leave a message, or email at contact@adramaofoutlander.com. You can also leave a note in YouTube where I post the podcast, or on the post on the website, or on Facebook or Twitter, wherever you find the link. I totally want to hear from you guys, so please join in. How else can you participate in the Dram of Outlander community? Well, Twitter and Instagram are under Dram of Outlander with no A in the front. Facebook has a giant page under A Dram of Outlander and a group that you have to answer some questions to join. It is closed. 3 simple questions so I know you're not a troll or up to no good. And it's also under A Dram of Outlander. And how can you support the podcast? My call to action to you is, please go to Apple Podcasts and iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play and leave a review for me. If you leave reviews, it will help people find the podcast. Share the podcast with your friends who read Outlander. Have them come and join on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram and follow. And on Wednesday nights, unless I'm catching a baby, join the chat on Twitter. It's under hashtag ADOO, and it's at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. We chat for about an hour or so about the chapters in the prior week's podcast. There are great people in the Dram of Outlander community, and you would be a welcome addition. The other way that you can support the podcast is financially. You can go to patreon.com/adramofOutlander and contribute even $1 a month. I'm a solo podcaster, so all the upkeep and running and behind the scenes action for the podcast falls completely on me. So every dollar counts, and I appreciate you helping me. And if you'd like to send a one-time offering, just drop me an email or a voicemail, and I'll let you know how to do that. I thank you so much for listening, and thank you for being my virtual friends along the way and letting me share my love of these incredible books with you. And next week, we are doing chapters 22 and 23. I look forward to hearing from you, and until next time, Slán Java.